Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of Three Simple Men Making Their Way Through the Galaxy. As you know, I'm Tom. With me, as always, Ryan and Mike. Today, we continue our path through episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And we start off at probably the best spot ever. It is the start of the pod racing. Guys, how are we doing today?
Great.
Doing good.
So let's just get into it with the pod racing, you know?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it last time. Vehicles, episodes start off with them. And in this case, yet again, we've managed to, even splitting the movie, started off with some vehicles. So we get a bunch of different pod racers and pods. Or I guess the racer would be a pod racer, and then the vehicle would also be a pod racer. So we get a bunch of different species and a bunch of different pods. Right off the bat, obviously we get the failure to launch of both Anakin and then Ben Quadinaro's pod racers don't work off the bat. So that's kind of fun, and then you get some more pod racing throughout. I guess what stands out from each of you from the pod race, like what, and not maybe from the specific rewatch, not something you always remembered, but did you catch anything or notice something this time that just kind of popped out at you?
I think, you know what, going back towards it, when we last episode when we were watching, when Watto says he always bets on Sebulba and Sebulba always wins, I think it's because Sebulba always wins because Sebulba is a goddamn cheater.
Absolutely. I want to, Mike, before you go, something interesting I noticed, a couple of things this watch. You talk about how Watto bets on Sebulba. Do either of you know who Jabba the Hutt bet on?
No.
Oh.
So it's not said, but I noticed this time that Jabba, let's see, it's after the first lap, Rats Tyrell pulls to the side and has his mechanic droids working on his pod, and one of them gets sucked into the engine and it blows up. And as soon as that happens, the next shot is Jabba, and he flicks one of his little like frog food things off the ledge. And then later at the end, we get another shot of Jabba just asleep at the end of it. So
wow.
I'm interpreting that as Jabba bet on Rats and then realized, well, realized
that's good, Mike. That's good.
Yeah, so I noticed that this time, which
quite the deep dive there. I mean, we haven't even gone to the end yet.
sorry, it's just something I noticed this time.
And Mike, you might be out of a job at this point.
A little analysis I picked up on, and I don't know if it's really true or not, but I'll consider that a trivia question.
Yeah.
To definitely consider that, who Jabba bet on, and I'd bet that's who he bet on.
Yeah. But just going back to the pod racing, you know what I love about it? It was just the whole vibe of it. It's like a space version of NASCAR / Formula One. You got the pit crew, you got the laps, and it's so fun to watch and how exhilarating it is, how fast they're going, and it's like that in my mind. That being said, Sebulba still, like, he found any means to just get that dub.
Yeah, I mean, he crashed. He made people crash a lot. He threw a spare part into one of the engines, and I guess Anakin, well, when we were watching last week, Anakin mentioned that, we'll flash you with this vent. So yeah, Sebulba is definitely up with, he's got a lot of dirty tricks up his sleeve. And for me, I mean, I feel like the pod race, I mean, just the way it's shot and stuff. I mean, it's always like you get like similar parts of the course, and you get different areas too that you get to explore. So just seeing like the thrill of like having those tight corners, going through the darkness at one point through the cave, and just like going into open area and then going around like trying to avoid getting shot by the Tuscan Raiders. I thought it was well done. And then I mean I'll get into this part of it too. I think just from when I watched it in the theaters back in 1999 versus what was shown on Disney Plus, I kind of feel like they changed up lap 2 a little bit, because I don't remember seeing like one of the pod racers having rear view camera trying to prevent Anakin from getting in front of him. And then there was that one part after Sebulba threw the part at that one pod racer, Anakin's pod racer was spinning out of control. I'm thinking, I'll try spinning. That's a good trick.
There it is. There it is.
So what you just mentioned, actually, before we do that, I need to already correct something I said. I just re-looked at my notes and the arrow I drew was off. And it's a shame because it really led to a great little joke. So I'm happy it happened. But Rats was not the character. It was Odie Mandrell was actually the guy who got the bet on. And my arrow, now looking at it, so that's on me. But this is the first time chronologically that we see Tuscan Raiders.
Yes.
Great characters. Obviously, one of the first, we'll see later on, characters we actually meet in all of Star Wars of a different species, basically, which is pretty cool if you think about it. But that's getting way ahead of ourselves.
It's the first time we saw a hut. It's the first time we saw multiple species. Also, I just want to throw out as a little side note of it, it's like to the actor Warwick Davis. We saw him
sitting right next to Watto.
It's just, if you're a true Star Wars fan like we are, is like, he's always been a big part of the Star Wars franchise. It's good to see him playing another part,
So I will say, I think, Mike, you mentioned I believe the pod racer who blows up. A couple of them blow up, but they show like a shot of his face, and I had to get his name. It's Mars Gao, I believe, or Guo.
Okay.
And he just immediately, it's like one shot of just his face, and I guess it's goggles, but it almost looks like he's wearing like a bandage over his eyes or something, or a wrap. He reminds me of, and this might be a little out there, but he reminds me of Blind Pew from Muppet Treasure Island. I don't know if you know that character or if that resonates with you, but every time I see him, I'm like, he reminds me of, Blind, and arguably he is probably a Muppet. Hopefully, maybe it depends. In that shot, I think it is. I don't think he might be CGI'd. Which is rough because a lot of characters are CGI'd in this.
It's funny that you brought him up, because that was the character I was thinking of. Because like when Sebulba threw the part into his engine, that was the part where the announcers were like, "Oh, I don't care what universe you're from, that's gotta hurt." But when they reshot it on the Disney Plus version, they had it with Tinto Pagales, who had that wheel of a pod race, and he got shot by the Tuscan Raiders, and you just see him wheeling off to the edge over there. So they reframed. So I mean, despite what I noticed, I thought they did a nice job just like reorganizing that lap 2, because I kind of feel like that flowed a lot better than versus what we saw in the theaters back in the day. So I mean, that was probably the biggest thing. But yeah, like I said, just having like that, the course design, just seeing different elements of it. And then another one that we saw at the beginning of lap 1 was Aura Singh. She was watching the pod races up from the elevation. So like,
I was gonna bring that up. Because I was gonna say, like, I think this could be the first bounty hunter we saw because of Aura Singh, because that was her. Well done.
And I think this might be the only time we see whatever species situation is the announcers, Fode and Bede. One speaks basic, one speaks an alien language, or Huttese, I guess, probably, if he's announcing there. But those are an interesting dual-headed character that I don't know if we see that species ever again. Correct me if I'm wrong. If anyone would know, it's Mike. Your instant recall of everything.
If you
very
know,
impressive.
just let us know in the comments. By the way, if you do know the answer, just give us a comment,
So, I don't want to graze over this. I go down our list of kind of things to talk about, and I realize we really don't get much force power used, force or powers used during
Yeah.
this section. What I will say is, I guess we kind of have to have the discussion of, Anakin, I guess, per Qui-Gon's discussion in the last part, in our last episode. We got to assume he's using Jedi reflexes to race the pod, right? He's the only human that can do it. It's definitely seems like, we don't get a use the Force Luke moment, but it does seem like he might be flirting with some sort of Force abilities during this. What do you guys think?
I
Yeah, he's just using his instincts. It's like when Qui-Gon just goes to him, you know, just use your instincts. And that's what he's always doing. And I guess it's like it's a weird way because it seems like he's not, like what we've seen so far with, going back to Tales of the Jedi with, younglings being force sensitive with the taming of that creature in the past episode we discussed. But this is different because, like you said, Ryan, he is human. He is doing this pod racing, which not a lot of humans could do. So it's giving off the vibe of there's something very special about him because you may not see it, but he's doing something that it's hard to explain. It's hard to, read. Like it just pretty much Qui-Gon just it's still baffling, to everyone's perspective. It's just pretty much like, how is he doing it? And Qui-Gon explained the best way Qui-Gon explained it was he sees things before it actually happens, so that's why he's always a step ahead.
I guess it's kind of like active force power or active force versus passive force. Like, do they have the ability to use the force passively without really necessarily knowing they're using it? And Mike, it looked like you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I kind of feel like just based on the way with the reshot with the second lap where Anakin's pod racer was spinning out of control, he was like reaching out. So like he might have like reached out and like that might have been like his way of using the force to get his engine back together. So we could have seen an early application of telekinesis. And to your point, yeah, it's kind of hard to explain.
I always assumed it was magnetic.
That I guess we'll open that up for
Oh,
comments.
you're right. You're right. He's holding that
Magnetic, or
thing, and I assume it's a magnet, but or
was it
maybe
either
it is. But
magnetic
is
or
it magnet? Is it so magnetic that it pulls
yeah,
it, or does he force pull
actually
it?
To reach
exactly.
out, like you said, Mike, that's actually a very good point.
And like you said too, it's just I mean, he only knew about the Force when Qui-Gon talked about it, so maybe he could have done things in his life, but it was just hard to explain, like you mentioned earlier, Tom.
Yeah.
So, I guess we'll open that up for debate. It's like, was it something magnetic that helped Anakin bring the pod back together, or did he actually reach out and use the Force to pull it back?
Of course. Moving forward, what do you think,
Yeah.
Ryan? I think we need to talk about the aftermath of the race, about how Watto didn't want to, give up Anakin. So, this is in the part of the universe where you start to get a little understanding about the Hutts in the sense that they are the gangsters. They're like the mafia, they control everything.
They're the government. They're everything there. Yeah, they're
Because Tatooine is like the Wild West in a sense, because it's just like anything goes. There's no rules, there's no laws, like Shmi said in the past. The Republic doesn't exist out there in Tatooine. So but yeah, you saw how quickly Watto went from I'm not giving up my slave to now just been like, okay, take him. Because the minute you bring up the Hutts, that's it. It's over.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for Watto is more used to be on the winning side. Sebulba always wins, but it just you win some, you lose some. But unfortunately for Watto, this is a very big race, and not only did he lose a lot of money on it, but he also lost Anakin in the process. So, he's trying to do anything he can to like recuperate his losses. But as soon as, like you said, Tom, once Qui-Gon brings up, should I bring this in front of the Hutt? He was like, oh crap, I can't. There's nothing I can do, and I gotta stick with what I agreed to.
Which we also know is a bluff by Qui-Gon, because when they land earlier, they say, well, the Hutts aren't looking for us. So they decide, keep a low profile, don't get in their way, So is he really going to go stand in front of the Hutts and say, hey, we want this piece of our ship and blah, blah, blah. And, like what? So definitely it was a little.
Like you mentioned
Bluff.
last week. Qui-Gon was definitely a big risk taker with this, acting out of the Jedi way, to get Anakin.
Yeah,
It wasn't the quote I wrote down, so I'm going to try to quote it. He says something along the lines of, to Watto, when you gamble, you eventually lose. And it's kind of interesting because, obviously that's what happens to Watto. But we could also say that that's what happens to Qui-Gon, because he's clearly gambling on, which we're going to get to shortly later on in this discussion, but he gambles on Anakin. I think he does. He pretty much states that he thinks he's the chosen one, and he wants him in front of the Jedi Council, which I think it's probably a good time. Well, let's not jump over the goodbye of Anakin, his mother, and of course his naked droid C-3PO. But we do get this kind of sad moment, especially for us, because we know what's going to happen and when they will see each other again. But that was kind of a little sad moment of goodbye. Any thoughts on that, or do we want to move on to the more fun part?
I have a few. Yeah, going up, it's very, it's this whole separation of him and his mom, like Anakin being freed and his mom still being a slave. All I can say is it's going to be problematic for the future that which we know, but this is one of those things where it's just like you are truly separating a kid from his mother, and him growing up as a slave, growing up just in a workshop, on a planet that the Republic didn't really care about. There's going to be problems down the road. It's like it's a human element towards it, where it's just like it's very sad, and it's hard to say goodbye. It truly is, and it's a terrible feeling, which is we're gonna go into my hot take a little bit later on that one.
Okay, all right, we'll save that. So let's move on to the. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I would say with that, it's just Anakin just felt this sense of freedom, sense of empowerment now that he's no longer a slave. And one of the things that his mom told him was like, you can't stop the suns from setting. So it's just like that kind of really, Anakin got a big reality check. Not only being freed as being freed, but also just, well, he can't have his mom come along with it. And that's one of the things that she tried to tell him. It's like, you got to let go, and that's one of the hardest things for a Jedi to do in their life, is to let go of like feelings or emotions. So as for the final goodbye, she's like, don't look back, just be brave and go forward with it. So I mean, it's definitely a very sad moment with that realization. And then, like, I think with Qui-Gon talking about it, it's like nothing happens by accident, and leads to the will of the Force, for this meeting between them. So I mean, we could say yes, he went out of the Jedi way, took a big gamble with Anakin, but at the same time too, he's going by the will of the Force, not necessarily going by what the Jedi Council is dictating, and kind of what we've been talking about over these past few weeks when we talk about Dooku and Qui-Gon, not necessarily going in line with the Council. So
he's letting the Force guide him. He's
right.
seeing it pretty much like, whatever our situation was, but for some reason, I tend to believe that the Force wanted me to be here, and it's just one of those. He's using it as an actual true ally instead of just using it as a form of, weaponry or defense. Like we saw it, like the last episodes with Tales of the Jedi,
Yeah, and I guess before we jump into Coruscant, let's talk
Oh,
about
well,
the
yeah.
Yeah,
takeoff.
I mean,
So,
come on.
Yes. I'm like, we can't skip over
What are we talking about?
one. We get Darth Maul's vehicle, so we get this. I'm gonna call it the comfortable speeder because he's got like a nice backrest situation going on this speeder bike. Looks very comfortable to me. But him and Qui-Gon fight, and
First lightsaber fight.
it is the first
lightsaber fight. Yeah.
lightsaber fight of period. You're right.
Mhm.
Chronologically. But interesting enough, Qui-Gon or Darth Maul doesn't put all his cards on the table. He only uses one blade during the fight. You notice that?
Yes.
We don't get a reveal yet that he has the dual bladed lightsaber. So that I thought was interesting that he decides to kind of see what he can do against this Jedi.
I do have a theory about that. Yeah, it's strange that he only used one side because we know he has the double bladed lightsaber.
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoiler alert.
Right now, yeah.
No, well, first of all, first time we ever saw a double bladed lightsaber chronologically in what we're doing. But no, I think it was never meant. My theory is it's never meant for him to, it's like going back when him and Darth Sidious were talking. It's like now it's time we reveal ourselves to the Jedi, and this is going to go into my theory when we're going to talk about a little bit later with the Jedi Council, and it's about him not trying to actually get his job done, but just to make a presence because, I guess we're gonna move forward to like the Jedi Council about how they believe that the Sith were extinct over a millennium. So it's pretty much like it's one of those one side of the story, the other side of the story, then but no one's gonna believe what's actually true in the sense.
So actually, in a deleted scene, they actually show the probe droid catching up to Qui-Gon and Anakin, and that's why you see them running through the desert. But yeah, I think to your point, Tom, it's not all about, killing Qui-Gon. It's just mainly, making his presence known that the Sith are back. Because I mean, at that point, the ship is ready to go, and he fights them, and like Qui-Gon barely holds him off. He knocks him down, and Force jumps up to the ship. But they could have put a tracker on it or something like that. But like you said, I think it's just mainly just to make it known that the Sith are back.
So with that, we head off to Coruscant. I will very quickly talk about another scene that I think, and just one part of it, we don't have to go way too into it, but Anakin gives a gift to Padme. He gives her the Japor snippet that he carved as a gift. It's a necklace. And I just want to point that out now because I believe we do see that again throughout the films and possibly the TV series. But so let's keep an eye out on that. It's kind of a cool little their first exchange of like clearly, Anakin's got a little crush or something. He's giving her a little gift. But then I'm gonna go right into my quote because believe it or not, it's pretty much at this point when they land on Coruscant. We get a little exchange out on the runway, but then we get or the landing pad. When we get the next scene is in an office, and this quote is actually kind of a throwaway quote, probably because it's actually said before the character saying it is even on screen. It's while they're like going through a door, like the camera's going through the doorway, coming in on Senator Palpatine speaking with Queen Amidala, and he says, and again, barely, like, off camera says it, there is no civility, only politics. And then we get the camera on them and they continue to talk about what needs to be done. But I found that very interesting that he kind of starts off with the there is no civility, only politics in his argument of why, the current chancellor is not, very effective, and maybe their options are, the no confidence or lawyers, bringing it to the courts. But, Palpatine says this and then proceeds to just play politics the rest of the conversation and the next scene when they're actually in the Senate. He's saying, "Oh, there's no civility, it's all politics." And there he is whispering into her ear while someone else is whispering into, and it's just clearly it's clearly politics. I mean, that's all it is, as we know, it's Palpatine attempting to gain more power, and he's playing the queen like a fiddle. I mean, just an absolute pawn in his political moves and agenda. So I found that kind of interesting. So that's my quote to take away from this episode. But do we want to discuss that? Anything before getting into the Senate hearing, or not?
I mean, the only thing I could
Yes.
probably say is, from what we've seen with Dooku and Tales of the Jedi about the senators, I think we're kind of slowly, first at hand, seeing it is about, not about politics. It's about, personal gain, trying to get what they want out of it in the galaxy and what their agendas are. So that's all I really have. Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, just the way like Palpatine's like starting his manipulation right away in the office, getting into the things that would similar themes that we've been seeing in Tales of the Jedi about, it's controlled by the bureaucrats. And yeah, he's planting the seed, and like you could see the difference between them because like the Queen's saying, well, Chancellor Valarm's been our strongest supporter, and then he's painting a different picture. Well, he's not really that strong a supporter. He's very weak and he's controlled by these bureaucrats. So I mean, we kind of see this like theme of a potential deep state going on here, and and like you said, he's got the agenda going on where it's like, well, we could either move for a vote of no confidence, or we can make a plea to the courts. And he's kind of put the queen in this bind. It's like, well, my people are starving, they're dying, like I got to do something, and may not, and that's where she's starting to lose her faith in the Senate. Just she came there to plead her case and hoping for a quick intervention, but just the way the Palpatine manipulated her, it's like, oh crap, now I'm really in this. I don't know what to do. Like, should I move for a vote of no confidence or actually make the plea to the courts? So I guess with that, now we'll jump into the actual Senate hearing.
Yes. Um, any thoughts on that? Or because I got
When we saw
something, but it
Wookiees,
might throw us off on a bit of a tangent.
first time we saw Wookiees.
Yes, and not just that, we also see ET
ET?
species.
That was actually going to be my. That was
Oh,
actually.
well, let's go in it. What do you got on it, Mike? Let's go in it. Let's go into your deep dive right now. What do you
Well, I
got?
mean, just the way with the like you said, there you see a lot of different species, but then you see like ET. So like now you have the ET representation. So that was actually going to be my deep dive of the week. But it's just like okay, it's just like all right. Yeah.
What do
So
you got? You got some info on ET and his species, or no?
no, I don't have anything. It's just I don't know if people caught it, but yeah. I
Got it.
mean,
So
people didn't catch it. ET is makes a cameo in the
his
set.
so his
So
species, which I wrote that they are the and you'll learn something about me if you continue to watch this podcast. I'm very bad at pronouncing things. So I'm going to go ahead and say that his species is called Asogians. I'll spell it Asogians. And, you know, without going on too much of a tangent, but I think it's kind of important to discuss. So if we're in agreement that obviously ET species exists in this galaxy far, far away and a long time ago. So the question is, could all of the Star Wars galaxy at the end of the day end except for the Asogians. Like, we at least know that the Asogians, maybe their species ends up being deep space travelers, but as far as we know, they're the only species from Star Wars to make it to Earth in the film E.T. So, we've never had Wookiees invading Earth. We've never had, so one could argue that, they're they could be the longest, they could be the sole survivors whenever this Star Wars show ends up ending, so maybe we'll get another eventually we'll get some more on them and their species in a telling. But we do know that they end up they do have healing powers, which is could be relevant to them staying alive and surviving as long as they do to make it to, what did I want to say, the 80s, maybe a little earlier. I'm trying to remember when the ET actually came out. But kind of interesting. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
I feel like, you know what, we could definitely get into that, if we want to keep continuing, time is just a little bit like, we're at like 7 minutes.
Don't never worry about the time, Tom.
Yeah.
We're good.
But it's interesting because, and when you watch ET, like, if you've seen ET, anyone out there who's seen ET, and when they have the Halloween scene, what does he dress up like as? Yoda.
Yep.
So it's just,
So there is a Yoda mask. So therefore, in the ET universe, Yoda exists, either as a mask, so you would assume he exists probably in pop culture, so the Star Wars films exist. So it gets very interesting. Maybe the Zogians, ET species, are also good archive document keepers, and maybe somehow they're the ones that carry the story of Star Wars to our timeline. Who knows? I don't know. Kind of interesting stuff.
Mention like healing and like who knows, maybe they've got some force sensitive members of their kind as well.
I'd pay money to watch a Jedi ET. I would.
You're right. Maybe ET was in fact had that uses the Force. That's possible. All right, so let's move on to the Senate, from the Senate to probably the last thing we have to discuss, which is the other
wrap up any of the actual Senate hearing, like about the
the vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mentioned during the quote that obviously we do have Palpatine whispering into her ear, convinces the Queen to, put forth the vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valoran. So yeah, it's definitely moving things forward. It's an important part. As boring to some people as watching a Senate hearing could be, this is a doozy. I mean, it's definitely important. One thing I found interesting: the Trade Federation has representation in the Senate, so yeah, they are their own planet or system, which is interesting.
Yeah, not to mention they were able to, they came in like, oh, we object, there's no proof, and somehow convinced the chancellor, hey, let's get a commission on this and just delay this even more. So yeah, I mean, just unfortunately with the Senate hearing, kind of pretty much Palpatine laid it out. He was right. It's like they're controlled by the bureaucrats, and you had like senators from Malastare who were even like, oh yeah, we support the Trade Federation with this, and just like, yep, there you go. So time to move in my vote, no confidence in Chancellor Valoran's leadership. So,
so then we move on.
Politics fail you.
Yeah.
Where do we see that nowadays?
So we do move on to the other hearing, the discussion of Anakin, both Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan obviously talking about the Sith, and then we end with the next scene in the Jedi Temple, with the Jedi Council actually questioning Anakin. And that's where we get, I didn't write down the quotes, but obviously very kind of famous Yoda with his, you know, this leads to this leads to that. You know,
Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering.
yes.
Pretty much all qualities down to the dark side. And I kind of want to get into my hot take now.
All right, let's do
I
it.
completely like I was gonna forget about it. It's from the Senate hearing to like when they get to Coruscant to the Jedi Council meeting. Not one person wanted to be like, "Hey, we just escaped Tatooine, and did you know there's still slavery in the universe?" No one's mentioned that at all, and it's just like, and then now the Jedi is just like, well, this boy is his thoughts are on his mother, and he's, well, yeah, he was a slave, and now he just got separated from the only person he truly loves. So it's like, I can what do you want to do? You know, not one person mentioned it.
So, I mean, I guess my response to your hot take would be obviously at the moment there's slightly more pressing issue of a hostile occupation, um, and the senator has to technically represent her people. But and I'm going to go to Mike's brain over here. Is it wrong, or am I wrong, or later on does Queen Amidala as Senator Amidala, does she try to make some moves against to end slavery?
I mean, I would have to explore the books. I mean,
Well, I
and
wasn't sure in the shows if there was some, because I know we do get some Senate episodes in the Clone Wars.
Yeah,
yeah. So I mean, and obviously when it gets to the Clone Wars, obviously it's more about the war. So I mean, I don't know if it has been. I'm sure we'll explore that option, but I mean, from what I can tell right now, there wasn't really, to Tom's point, there wasn't really much done to address the slavery in the Outer Rim and then like like the poor living conditions out that way. Um, so just going back to the Jedi Council, I mean, first start off with Qui-Gon letting everyone know, hey, the Sith have returned, and they're like, no way, that's impossible. We didn't sense this. Um, And then right as they're about to leave, Obi-Wan's ready to go out, but then you just see Qui-Gon standing there. He's like, well, I've encountered divergence in the Force. And he talks about Anakin. They're like, and again, like you just see like, Qui-Gon and the council going back and forth with their different points of view. And Qui-Gon made it very clear. It's like, well, fighting him was the will of the Force. And I think that's what ultimately convinced them to actually go forward with the tests. And then one of Obi-Wan's quotes was, don't defy the council, not again. And Qui-Gon's like, I shall do what I must. And then one other thing I caught, and again, just from what we saw in theaters versus the re-release, Yoda was changed from a puppet to a CGI.
Yeah, so I don't ever, I don't like to be a hater, especially when it comes to things I love, and Star Wars being one of them. But I'm gonna hate a little here. And the use of the CGI, I love practical effects. That's why I was so happy when they did the sequel trilogy, and right off the bat had the stormtroopers were people in costumes, and they dialed back the CGI and go back to that practical effects. I mean, some of my favorite horror movies of all times are ones that use practical effects, where it's puppets and not this kind of CGI. And though CGI has gotten very, very good, it's come a long way since these prequels. um Something about when you can really do practical effects and do them well, it's just so impressive.
can I just say this? Since we're talking about this, like I agree with you both completely. I kind of want to revert to a different movie from how different it was. When Lord of the Rings came out, they used the practical, cosmetic makeup for all like the the orcs and the Uruk-hai. And then when you go into the Hobbit, they did more CGI stuff, and it's like you can definitely tell the difference. And to your credit, Ryan, you're absolutely right. It's like sometimes CGI is good, where it's like with the battle droids and stuff like that, that you see, but sometimes you need that you just need people behind the mask in a way where it's just like it gives it a better feel.
Yeah, speaking behind the mask, I mean, we got your real life, you can touch it, Boba Fett mask behind you.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, Mike can't reach out and touch Coruscant behind him. So there's your CGI versus practical. I mean, but it just gives you it's something special about it. And again, I don't want to disparage like CGI artists, and like when it's done right, it's done. It's great. I think a good example to go. I thought in The Hobbit, I thought Smog was great.
Yes.
Even
Yeah.
as CGI, and to see what Benedict Cumberbatch did, crawling around on the ground, doing the capture motion for that, it's also very impressive. But again, it's got to be done right, and it's some of those like the big establishing shots that we're gonna get later of like the clones, and it's just the rows and rows of the clones, and it's like, oh, this looks so bad compared to when you can get at least the first few rows to be real people, and then you do CGI in the back, so at least you get that kind of that masking, and it looks better that way. But we will definitely have more conversations about the CGI going forward, because it definitely is noticeable, which again I find funny too, because then we go into, obviously after this, after the next two movies, we're going to go pretty heavy into the animation, and it's not something you have to really complain about. We can talk about animation style, which will come with some of the other shows, but the animation, it's animation, so you can watch it and kind of view that all without having to worry about the mismatch.
And like you said, Ryan, like we're not trying to speak negatively about everything with CGI and stuff like that. We're addressing it right off the bat. Like, listen, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, and we grew up, the three of us grew up during, well, we originally loved the original trilogy, the three of us, but we grew up on the prequel trilogy because it was coming out towards when we were at an age where we can go see it and understand it. But I think, Ryan, I think you're the first one that's a bigger Star Wars fan than us, because you knew it.
I knew about it earlier, and it was and it was because my uncle and my parents had gotten me like almost at birth, but very quickly into watching them and getting toys and stuff. So yeah, I did have a weird kind of little bit, and all being the same age, it was just kind of a weird, the family around me situation, who were also fans, which helped. And then of course, we all became, the same level. I still remember Mike dressed up as Darth Vader at a very, very, very young age, sitting on the school bus for Halloween. He wasn't like a weirdo who just showed up to school dressed like Darth
So
Vader.
now, oh no,
not that there's anything wrong.
Now
with
I'm disappointed. I wanted him to just do
I
it.
shouldn't say weirdo. If you want to dress up like Darth Vader and go to school, you should. Life's short. Go ahead.
Also, the fact that we always had lightsaber fights growing up.
We could go into that for a while. At one point, we
God.
just ditched the lightsabers altogether and just pretended wiffle ball bats were lightsabers. Yeah. So yeah, we get that. The CGI. We get some other characters. Obviously, we get a lot of nice Mace Windu in this one. This time played by none other than Samuel L. Jackson himself. Just a legendary actor brought in to play a character. We don't get to see his lightsaber in this one. I believe we will see that next go around.
I think we were talking about this.
Because we do get him in the animated series. Or obviously in his earlier episode, we have him in Tales of the Jedi. But so that's fun.
It's the first time we actually see the Jedi Council too.
Yes.
Chronologically in order. And you see a lot of different, species, and you see a lot of different, members of the council. We have Yaddle, who's like a Yoda. We have Kiadi-Mundi, Stacey, Eithkoth,
10, yep. I think Depa Balaba. There's
Yes. Thank you, Mike.
and like you said, Tom, or you mentioned Yaddle, and we're gonna see Yaddle and coming up in our future episodes. So yeah,
Yes.
definitely got a variety, and also just seeing the Jedi Temple for the first time as well.
Nope, not the first time. Right? Didn't we see it for the funeral of the Jedi that passed away in?
I think we had like an external shot. I don't think we had.
Yeah, they're inside, and we don't see. We see the external shot. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
So we do see it, but not the inside of the actual.
Going back towards it, can we talk about Coruscant for just a quick second? How the fact that the past couple of episodes we watched with Tales of the Jedi, it was like simple planets, to now we gone to a planet that's like a huge capital city industrial, world. And
we don't even see the ground level yet. It's all these upper landing platforms and the space highways of these speeder ship like craft. We do see it. We do go to Coruscant, and we did in some past episodes, briefly. But yeah, it's definitely a very interesting city, starkly compared to Tatooine.
That's
You get a very
or maybe the other Tesla Jedi planets that we saw.
Yeah, you get two very different planets, a desert planet versus city planet, which is fun.
I don't know if anyone notices, just going back to like being on Coruscant, where Queen Amidala was talking with Senator Palpatine. Did anyone notice just Anakin just pull Jar Jar away from the window?
No, I didn't see that.
Later on, go back and rewatch that episode. You just see Anakin just pull Jar Jar, and Jar Jar's going like,
Oh, like in the first meeting when the first meeting, not like the second. Okay.
Yeah, I thought that was funny. Also, I got one more note. This is gonna hit hard for us because this is actually, it's the first time going back to Tatooine. It's the first time we hear C-3PO mention the Maker, because he's always said bless the Maker. Who's always been the Maker? Now we know.
I guess we'll talk about this, but this is probably the only time that we're gonna hear someone call Anakin a master.
Oh man, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, but this is just too funny.
That is a good point.
Oh man, you ever seen that meme about Anakin trying to buy groceries or some stuff like that, and it's like, your card's got declined. Why? Because you don't have a MasterCard. Oh man.
I guess with that, Mike, take it away.
Well, that's a wrap. Thank you everyone for joining Three Simple Men making their way through the galaxy. Hit that like, comment, and subscribe, and come back next week for some more Star Wars Episode 1 Phantom Menace content. May the Force be with you, always.